Where is AI making a difference at the grassroots? Like any other technology, AI has its pluses and minuses. Deepfakes, digital misinformation, biasness, then there are ethical concerns also. At some point, that regulation has to come in, and in order to regulate, these AI systems. And it is not humanly possible for an AI to pick up our brains. We as humans are stereotypical, we are biased. So sometimes that bias also comes up in the data set because facts are sacred, right? Your sources are sacred. That AI is not going to change that. AI will only help you make your work efficient. But AI will certainly, take away the jobs which are redundant already. Be aware of what AI brings to the table and also be aware of what it can take from you.
Hello and welcome to Department of Media and Communication, MIT-WPU University, the Social Listening Podcast, where we give you dozens of insights, ideas, and conversations that matter. I'm your host for the day, Ananya, from Master's first year, and I'm so glad to have with us today a very special guest, Mr. Shakoor Rather. He is the CEO and head of Science Matters, former editor-in-chief and head of India AI, and executive by Ministry of Electronics and IT and NASA. So, my first question to you is that could you tell us a little about how Kashmir has influenced you to pursue journalism? I think you about it.
While growing up, my grandfather always used to uh, recite stories from Iqbal, Ghalib, Faiz Ahmad Faiz. So that art of storytelling, stayed with me when I grew up. And while growing up in the 90s in Kashmir, which was a very politically difficult time to be in Kashmir, a lot of uncertainty, was around. So, uh, those stories kind of were etched in my head all the time. And when the time came, I was a science student. Then this mass communication, option opened up to me. So I kind of liked the way I could tell these stories, through fact, right? Quoting the right experts. So I never looked back after that. It was a difficult decision to, change transition from science to mass communication, but it kind of paid, off in my case. Yeah.
So, one interesting thing about your notice is that your transition from being a journalist to an author, as you said, you've written novel, Life in the Block, being married. So, amazing.
So when you are a journalist, you are mostly reporting facts, right? You cannot put your own emotions into that story. It has to be always balanced from with this expert, that expert. It has to be factual, But through fiction, you can deeply and emotionally connect with the readers. You can also fictionalize certain aspects or events which otherwise you would not be able to tell through maybe non-fiction or through journalism. Right. So that art of storytelling, fiction kind of, elevates that art of storytelling. And so fiction could cover a lot of aspects, which I did uh, through my first book, Life in the Clock Tower Valley. The book is about past, present, and the future of Kashmir. It's a love story set in Kashmir, the beautiful Srinagar city. That is the universe of the book. And the book kind of tells you the story of Kashmir through wit, through humor, through imagination. I also use a lot of magical realism in my stories. So that, having said that, that would not have been possible through journalism. Uh, that is why I chose, fiction as a means of, putting those things across. And also, I think as a fiction writer, you can always imagine new things. You know, you can put your imagination into your writing, so that kind of resonates with your.
So, being a renewable student myself, I am really curious to get all the advice I can. Like someone like you, I'd especially have you give some advice to aspiring journalists on balancing factual stories and a little bit of storytelling and keeping the audience engaged?
I think the first and foremost thing that I would advise if I was a uh, journalism student like you would be that you should have your USP. Stay unique. Uh, don't try to imitate others. Because what will stand you in the crowd is your uniqueness at the end of the day. Read a lot. I think I advise this to all my all the budding journalists that if you are a good reader, then only you will become a good writer. And if you are a good writer, then only you will be able to imagine in a better way. Even if it is to put your stories through images or videos, for that the base is laid in reading and writing. So that is one thing that I would suggest all the journalists should do. Second thing is you should always have this inquisitive mind. We should not just scratch at the surface. We should look beyond, what is under the surface. Kind of peel off the layers of the story. Keep your eyes and ears open, as they say in journalism schools, have that nose for news, right? Uh, and then most importantly, detach yourself from the subject you're writing about. Because sometimes you can get emotionally invested in a story, but that will kill your story because then that biasness would reflect in your story. So when you are a journalist, I think you should definitely detach and try to balance your story, garnish it with facts, but at the end of the day, also have good command of the storytelling because it's not just important to report facts; it's also important to report facts in a very interesting, efficient way. You have to know where your audiences are. For example, why do you think these big media houses like Al Jazeera, BBC, the New York Times, they're all on TikTok and Instagram because they know a large number of people and the audiences. They are on these platforms, right? So you have to tap to those audiences and you should be open to the change. For example, now is the year of artificial intelligence. So similarly, you have to be open to this wave and see how you can tell your stories, in a much efficient way.
So, for our next segment of podcast, I would like to invite my colleague Shruti, who will continue with the podcast.
So, sir, it was really fascinating to know that your insights come from a life well lived and life lived in the valley, and that has made our audience even more eager to know about your work as a journalist. So, now for this segment, I am your host Shruti, and welcome to the next session of the Social Listening Podcast. Today, we are in conversation with Shakoor sir, and now we are going to be delving into his work as a journalist, now at the threshold where the newsroom has been integrated with AI and automation. So, for aspiring journalists, automation and AI is now an inseparable part of the newsroom. So, how do we move forward from here and take up the challenge as students?
I think we should embrace AI with an open mind. Like any other technology, AI has its pluses and minuses. So we should embrace the pluses. Like AI will make you a more efficient, person as a journalist. It will help you, take care of a lot of things which were like redundant, and so that you can focus on things which are more creative. But at the same time, AI brings with it, challenges like deep fakes. Then we have, digital misinformation and biasness. Then there are ethical concerns also. So that also gives us, at the same time, it makes us wonder how we should deal with it. But it also gives us a chance as a journalist to report on these things. So I would say, overall, the advent of AI and of late Gen AI is a blessing in disguise for journalists because we will be embracing the good parts of it in our newsroom, and at the same time we'll be writing about the ethical concerns, around AI. So I think responsible use of AI is what the doctor orders, and we should always have that human in the loop, when we are using with AI systems.
So, since you mentioned that ethical concerns regarding AI are on the rise, would you like to comment on the state of media regulation in India?
Right now, there are no hard and fast regulations in place. There is a IT Act, which kind of is an umbrella act, under which all the technology comes. So I think India is still embracing this technology, and they want to regulate it, when they cross that bridge. Right now, the focus is on embracing it mostly, using this technology at the grassroots. I always believe that technology should be used. It should help. It should not just be about content creation. It should help the poor and the marginalized, rise from their economic status, right? It should help us. For example, in India's case, we have a lot of diseases. So, a lot of organizations have their use cases where diseases can be detected earlier. Then there are, then there are a lot of premature deaths that happen. So AI could help us in that direction. At the same time, AI can also help the farmers better their productivity by using drone technology, by mapping the soil, right, and giving predictive analysis. So I think AI should be AI in India is at an interesting phase, and we all should embrace it and see to it. But regulation, at the same time, I think is important because, like I said earlier, the deepfakes, the misinformation, data privacy, usage, the biasness, these all things are still there. So at some point, that regulation has to come in, and in order to regulate, these AI systems.
So, sir, since now AI is clearly a bane and a boon both, so how do you feel about AI as a beat in journalism? And how can students and institutions themselves cater to it as a necessity in the industry?
Well, certainly, 5-6 years back, there were no climate reporters. But then, when the climate change reality hit us home. So we thought of, the journalistic fraternity thought, no, we should have dedicated people who write about climate change. Similarly, there are dedicated people who write about public health. And now newsrooms have realized that it's important to have people who can understand this technology of AI, because a generalized journalist may not be able to do justice to this beat. So we need AI editors and AI journalists who understand the technology a bit, who understand the basics at least, how the LLMs function, what is the natural language processing, right? What are the different models and what is the layering, what are horizontal models, what are vertical models, what is open source. So all of this will need some expertise, at our level. So that's why I think I welcome the step of a lot of newsrooms, having AI editors working around the clock. And because AI has now opened up an entirely new beat, right? And there's so much to cover around it. Like I said, its responsible use, which companies are using it unethically or which are using it ethically. Where is AI making a difference at the grassroots, right? Is AI only being used for content creation, or is it really making a difference in a large population, in India's case, which are still not educated, which still are not economically well off? So is it making a difference in their lives? So you have a gamut of stories, so there is a story everywhere about AI to be written about, and its side effects, which you can write about.
And you need a person to write that.
Definitely.
So, since you mentioned, like rightly said, India has a large demographic base. So, sometimes, since these technologies carry out their functions based on existing data sets, there's a huge chance that certain minorities or ethnic groups are misrepresented. And how do we prevent that historical and cultural erasure, simultaneously balancing technology?
Well, the answer is in using, indigenous data sets, anonymized indigenous data sets, which can be representative of a larger section of the society, not just using sampling and chunks from here and there, or using similar models which are working in the West, which are mostly English language models, and kind of trying to use them here. The answer lies in using local indigenous LLMs, and a lot of companies are already doing that. For example, AI for Bharat, Sarvam is doing it. So a lot of these companies are using indigenous, data sets, and as a result, the results are being improved. The models are much improved when you use them for a use case like healthcare or for agriculture. I think you will get much better results through these indigenous data sets.
And sir, that AI and these technologies are integral now is not a doubt, but sometimes you can see the digital divide within the industry because of that. So, how do you think is going to affect the narrative shaping and ultimately the source output source of journalism?
See, at the end of the day, see, the data is coming from humans, right? And we as humans are stereotypical, we are biased. So sometimes that bias also comes up in the data set and in turn in LLMs. I gave the example of stable diffusion earlier, that how it kind of accentuated the stereotypes against women in its models. Uh, Similarly, a lot of AI models which were earlier used for governance in, say, Netherlands and US, they had strong biases against minorities and migrants. So those AI systems were not, the data fed into those systems was biased. That is why a human in the loop is important. You have to have a human, in the loop, and you have to have a representative sample. If you are just going to use random sample, it will not cut through. It will not help you. It is going to, result in biased AI systems.
And so, lastly, sir, at since we're at the height of technological advent, do you think that it's important for journalists to go back to their basics and go back to writing, go back to pen and paper sometimes? Do you think that helps?
I think the basics of journalism will always stay the same. The basics of journalism 100 years ago was check facts, have your sourcing correct, cross-check the facts, use a balanced, use balanced sources. That is something which will not, change, because facts are sacred, right? Your sources are sacred. That AI is not going to change that. AI will only help you make your work efficient. As a journalist, if you want, even in content industry, if you want your content to just be content, then you can use AI systems, right, left, and center. But if you want your content to be emotive, if you want your content to be relevant, if you want your content to to call for action, then it has to be monitored. Not just monitored, it has to be majorly written by a human. And it is not humanly possible for an AI to pick up our brains, to reflect those realities in its output. It might get there, but I think it will mostly be about how efficient the AI systems become. At the end of the day, there is no substitute for an AI journalist, especially ground reporting. There is no substitute for ground reporting. A robot will not go to ground and talk to people and wait for them to vent their emotions. That is only possible through human journalists. So I don't see AI impacting us in that way, but AI will certainly take away the jobs which are redundant already, where there is not a lot of thinking happening. For example, if you are just doing TV monitoring, maybe in a newsroom, that AI might take away. If you're just on the desk, turning out newsletters, maybe AI might take away that. But the ground reporting, the basic journalism, will be done by humans even after many, many years.
That was very thought provoking, sir. And I especially liked the word, like the phrase, your content should be your motive. So, as we part, sir, would you have any words of wisdom for our audience?
I think audiences are smart enough to know, that AI is just another technology. We are at the cusp of another revolution kind of a thing, because this technology is everywhere, because it's growing at a very rapid speed. We haven't seen technology growing at this speed in a long, long time. Earlier, when different technologies came up, they were growing, but they took maybe a decade to evolve, but AI is evolving every day. AI is evolving, AI systems are evolving every month. There are new models being launched every week. So what I would suggest is that, be aware of what AI brings to the table and also be aware of what it can take from you. There are ethical concerns, there is biasness, there is the human in the loop concept in AI governance. I think we should all be aware of those things, and we should all, embrace this technology, but at the same time have those guardrails up, all the time.
Thank you so much, sir. It is refreshing to see someone who is point blank stating both sides of the story. So we are especially glad that you told us not only about the merits of it, but the demerits of it that we need to be aware of. And so thank you so much for sparing your time and valuable wisdom with us.
Thank you
And
so much for having me.
So signing off, this was Shruti in conversation with Shakoor Rather. And I hope you join us for further such conversations where the future is actually now. For more updates, keep watching the Social Podcast.